Hi, welcome back to Plan9Crunch. I'm Joe Gibson, and a little bit ago, possibly 2 weeks, depending on how the schedule cranked out, I read from Ultraman, the official novel of the series. This week, I will read from Ultraseven, the official novel of the series, both by Pat Cadigan, both released by Titan Books. And how should I start with this? I mentioned in my larger video going over the Ultra series and my experience with it that I have a lot less interest in Ultraseven than I do Ultraman. Even though there are some things in it that would appeal to me. Some of the monsters are some of the cooler ones in the series, that reappear a lot. The tone seems to be a little bit closer to what I want than the original Ultraman is. I didn't clarify why I'm not as interested in Ultraseven. Much of it comes down to the design of Ultraseven here. Okay, so you're starting with Ultraman, one of the most iconic designs for a superhero there's ever been. The red and the silver, the way it has the human-like proportions in it, but has the latex, uncanny kind of cover to it. Sorry, Ultraman C-Type. They fixed the mask a couple times throughout the show. It's a little bit goofier in the beginning than they... Honestly, B-Type is worse than A-Type was for the Ultraman suit, but Ultraman C-Type that's in the last batch of episodes, that's the best iconic superhero design in the show. Anyways, so you're going from that into Ultraseven. I guess you want to make him like a knight with a little bit of armor and more of a knight-like helmet, but you're doing that in the most non-committal way possible. He just has some like clavicle armor that covers his shoulders a little bit. I don't get that. It just seems try-hard to me. Oh, the color timer's too dumb. You're going to stick it on the forehead, whatever. And then, this is the part that I find the dumbest. He has the little sharp bit over his head. It's the slugger that he can take off as a knife. I've never gotten the idea of the slugger. It's always been dumb to me. Later Ultras will just have swords. Why not just have a sword? Purely superficial reasons, mind you. I bought this because I wanted to, because I enjoyed this. However, this is actually much better than this, to the point where I might want to get into Ultraseven as a series, but I'm getting ahead of myself. All the weird copyright stuff applies that I mentioned with Ultraman, the official novel, to Ultraseven, the official novel, except this is new, really new. So I want to make sure that I'm not stepping on anyone's feet at Titan Books, annoying them at all. The ISBN here is 978-18033-62441. If nothing else you've learned that today, that's educational. Okay. Ultraseven also contrasts the original Ultraman in terms of the approach that they take to, well, to how they're a Christ allegory, is sort of how I'll phrase it here. I don't want to keep harping on it any more than you want to keep hearing it, but I think there's a lot of evidence that Ultraman was meant to be a Christ allegory, and that they've kept that at the back of their mind, subconsciously, throughout the different shows. But there's a notable difference, because there's two types of protagonists that you'll have in these shows, probably more than two types, but these are the main two types. You'll have the mergings, where an Ultra being merged with a human inside of their body to fight the monsters and save the day. And in that sense, it's a call to action where the human is still a human, still experiencing humanity, but also has something alien, something godlike inside of them. Ones like Ultraseven, Dan Moriboshi is the human form of Ultraseven. But that's human form. Ultraseven is the being, though I guess he gets named Ultraseven in this story, so I'm not really sure where his name comes from outside of that. It's the same problem with Ultraman, where the majority of the species, the race, is Ultraman then a name. Ultraman Zophi, Ultraman Belial, Ultraman Jack, Ultraman Leo, Ultraman Ace, Ultraman Taro, Ultraman Orb. Ultraman Omega is the newest one. But this is Ultraman. I guess we have people named Guy in reality. It's still weird. But Dan Moriboshi is the human incarnation of Ultraseven. So it's a different kind of Christ allegory where it is God taking human form but still being mostly God. And you get that actually in a lot of the shows. I've realized as I've started reading this, I kind of prefer that take. Okay, I've said it's a Christ thing. How do I back this up? It's the difference between the Gospel of Mark and the Gospel of John. Okay, in the Gospel of Mark, he is called to his mission. It emphasizes his weakness as a human, his human frailties in Mark. And because there's no virgin birth account in there, and actually his family members think he's crazy once he starts preaching, if you are reading Mark without reading anything else in mind, you were sort of meant to assume that he wasn't magical before that. That was his awakening, his call to action. That's similar to when an Ultra being will merge with a human. Whereas a Gospel of really Mark and Luke have the virgin birth thing and imply some kind of infancy gospel, but John particularly is the most magical of them, where he is the Word, he's omniscient, he was spying on Nathaniel underneath a tree. Nathaniel, who is also called Bartholomew. Anyway, and sort of like John versus Mark, the side characters, the disciples, if you will, are so much more interesting in this book than they were in this book. But I'm getting ahead of myself. For one thing, this new one is thicker. You can't really tell based on this all too well. I'm trying to find the best angle to show it off to you. But whereas this is about 280 pages long, Ultraseven is about 330. Actually, it's 8 chapters here and 7 chapters here. I haven't watched Ultraseven, so I don't really know exactly what episodes they're pulling from. I'm assuming the ones on the cover. You gotta have Ella King here. Pandon is the big bad, but Pandon had 2 episodes. I say big bad, the final opponent. Pandon had 2 episodes. Maybe that's why there's 2 chapters, or 1 chapter more. King Joe's also a monster. That's right there. Alien Metron as a agent. I'm stalling because I want it to be enough of an informative view here before we get into the actual reading and thus copyrightable material. But anyway, I'm going to read a section that helps me to clarify why I find Dan Moriboshi so interesting as a perspective to follow, and one that ultimately originated a lot of what I like about Guy Kurenai from Ultraman Orb and the new Ultraman Omega, who we'll discuss a little bit more later. This is page 27. The stranger who had introduced himself as Dan Moriboshi listened intently to Ann Yuri. As she gave him a quick rundown of the Ultra Guard and the TDF, he was aware of Captain Kiriyama making his way over to them. In fact, he had already gleaned quite a lot of what she was telling him, but despite the coincidence of the Special Squad's name, humans weren't Ultras, not even close. It was best to let humans share information in their usual way. On this world, very little ever went without saying, or at the very least, an opinion. Captain Kiriyama had a lot of questions for him. He could sense them running through the man's mind. Who are you? Where did you come from? And where are you going? What are your intentions toward us, toward the world, toward anything? The only way he could help these people would be to gain Kiriyama's confidence, make him an ally, and that required meaningful communication. I'm merely a traveler. Just passing through wouldn't cut it. At the same time, however, he had to avoid interfering with their natural development by telling them too much. He'd already made a significant change in the scheme of things when he had saved the fallen climber on the mountain. He hadn't intended to take such a crucial action, but when the climber had cut his own rope to prevent his companion from falling to his death with him, he had reacted automatically. But in truth, even if he had had time to think about it, he'd have done the same thing. There was no good reason not to. Humans, he had learned, didn't live very long, barely long enough to know they were alive. To let such a short life be cut even shorter was an inexcusable waste, especially since the man had put his climbing partner's life ahead of his own. Self-sacrifice was a virtue normally found only in the most advanced beings, and yet a life form that barely lived longer than an eye blink had not hesitated. Such a species deserved a little extra help on their journey toward enlightenment. That's a bit of an introduction to Dan Moriboshi, though we have him playing off the other Ultra Guard characters before then. I also want to jump to an alien's perspective on humanity, because especially in the first book, I found the prose interesting in reframing the show. But also, with the longer page count, with the more well-developed characters, at least initially, I'm only this far into the book. I just had to do a read on it because I was enjoying it so much. I find the prose even more interesting here. It was in chapter 2, the Eleking chapter. So, members of the Ultra Guard are interacting with the guy who's fishing. He's catching a really big fish, so to speak here. Not actually a fish, so a little girl that's an alien in disguise cuts his line. The little thief watched the men from behind a clump of bushes, still smiling. If the big clumsy men kept chasing her, they were going to find the ship, but they were supposed to. Their capturing Eleking, however, wasn't part of the plan. She released the little creature back into the lake with a whispered reminder to be more careful. Although it wasn't really Eleking's fault. Who would have imagined that on this absurd planet, the dominant species sat by bodies of water dangling morsels of food on barbed metal hooks, tempting any unwary creatures in the vicinity? If she hadn't come along, that wrinkly old human would have eaten Eleking. Unthinkable. It's just a degree of creativity. I just lost my bookmark. A degree of creativity in describing these monsters that I appreciate. Though I should also give a bit more context for the show. I haven't watched it. I know a little bit about it. So Dan Moriboshi is Ultraman, but he also has capsule monsters that served as inspiration for Pokemon. So he's got the robotic monster, or the metal monster. This book makes a point of specifying that it doesn't make him a robot for him to be an organic creature made of metal, which kind of explains the existence of Mecha Gamora later on as a creature that can be revived. Anyway, Windom is the mechanical monster there. The first of the capsule monsters, not to be confused with Windom Earl, an antagonist on Twin Peaks. Then the shorter, ugly guy is Miklas, not to be confused with Mikuláš, the Hungarian Santa Claus. And then the last one is a ceratopsian called Agira. I've got nothing that sounds like Agira. Ultraman is a very influential show. Ultraseven also, if you like Pokemon, this is why that exists, at least partially. As I mentioned, though, part of the appeal of Ultraman and part of the appeal of the Gospel of John is how would a godlike alien see these humans? How would other aliens see these humans? And all that stuff. And that follows in other shows. As I mentioned, it's the two types of Ultraman that you'll follow. The one that is merging with a human, or the one that's just pretending to be a human. Ultraman Orb, a show I watched in full, deals more with the category of Ultraseven, the one where he is the human form of the Ultra, going to Earth, specifically as a traveler, as a wandering traveler. That's something Orb just lifts straight from 7. I like Orb a lot, and 7's where he got it from. Maybe I have to check out 7. Most recently, Ultraman Omega is airing on the official YouTube channel for Ultraman. Watch the first episode. I'm about to watch the second episode. I'm enjoying it a lot. He has amnesia, you see. But again, it's the human form of an Ultra, not a human merged with an Ultra. And actually, he has a slugger as well, a little thing on the top of the head that he takes out to transform into Ultraman, or just to fight the monsters with. And it's redeeming the concept a little bit for me. I still think Ultraseven's design is dumb. And what's worse is that aspects of Ultraseven keep finding themselves in the remaining Showa Ultras, aside from Ultraman 80. They'll have the weird clavicle plating, or the light at the forehead, that start with Ultraseven. So you can't ignore Ultraseven. One thing I want to mention about Omega that also exists in this book, funnily enough, is that there's toy advertisements. The Ultra series becomes toyetic because Bandai gets a stake in the company of Super Eye Productions or whatever, and so you can't go more than 10 minutes in Ultraman Omega without it being a cut to a commercial break for toys. Funnily enough, at the end of this book, there's a thing advertising the toys you could buy, or advertising the card game. It's just so toyetic after a certain point. It doesn't make it bad. Anyway, I've spun my wheels for long enough here. I recommend these books, particularly this one. Thank you all for watching. Let us know if you want more of this content with a like or a comment. Subscribe if you can. We also follow us on our TikTok page or our Facebook page or our traditional blog, Plan9Crunch.com, if you want to. That's a wrap.